Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Emma.
I'm Lucy.
This week, the unfair dismissal case brought by journalist Antoinette Lattouf against the ABC is being heard in court. The case centres around a claim by Lattouf that she was fired by the ABC halfway through a short-term contract because of a post she shared to Instagram about the war in Gaza. The ABC is fighting against the claims and says the journalist was not unfairly dismissed.
So, this case has been a pretty big one for the media industry because it involves the national broadcaster, the ABC, and that broadcaster has been involved in a very public, sometimes ugly dispute with this journalist, Antoinette Lattouf. Can you take me back to the beginning? Where did this all start?
Yeah, it's been going on for a little while and it's taken many twists and turns. So it's been hard to keep up with if you've just kind of been seeing the headlines. So we are going to bring everyone up to speed today. Antoinette Lattouf is a Lebanese-Australian broadcaster and author. She founded the not-for-profit Media Diversity Australia, and she was hired by the ABC to host a radio program for ABC Sydney. And that was in December 2023. She was hired to host this program from the 18th to the 22nd of December to fill in for the show's regular host, who was on leave at the time.
Yeah.
So Lattouf completed a few of those days hosting the show under that short-term contract, but halfway through, her contract was terminated. Now, that was after ABC management raised concerns over a post that Antoinette Lattouf had shared on social media. It was from Human Rights Watch.
Okay.
And the post in question was a video in which the organisation Human Rights Watch claimed Israel was starving civilians in Gaza as part of its ongoing war with Hamas.
Yeah.
Lattouf is understood to have shared this video to her personal Instagram account with the comment, Human Rights Watch reporting starvation as tool of war.
Yeah.
Lattouf was dismissed from her role on the 20th of December, so that's 2 days after she'd started that gig and 2 days before the contract was due to finish.
And so was the reason given by the ABC for dismissing her related to that post?
Yeah. So the ABC said that Lattouf was asked not to post about, quote, matters of controversy. And they argued that she'd breached the organisation's social media policy and this directive by posting that Human Rights Watch video. Now, worth mentioning here that as the national broadcaster, which means it's funded by taxpayer money, the ABC does have these really strict editorial standards. It has to uphold really strict impartiality standards to ensure that taxpayer money isn't perceived to be used in any kind of way for bias. So there are lots of public documents published with these editorial standards that anyone can read. And, you know, you've probably seen in the media over the years different conversations about what that bias can look like, what impartiality looks like, but it is critical to the integrity of the public broadcaster.
Yeah, it's a public service, which is why it's paid for by taxpayer money. Yeah. So your money, effectively. Yeah. So she's let go from this contract and she says that that dismissal was not legal to do. Do we know why?
So Antoinette Lattouf says that she was unfairly dismissed on the basis of her political opinion and race. So under the Fair Work Act, which is federal legislation about the rights of workers, an employer must not terminate your employment for a number of reasons, including things like being on parental leave or being part of a trade union. So there are certain rights that are protected under this act. The Act also says you can't terminate someone's employment on the basis of race, colour, sex, sexual orientation, age, physical or mental disability, marital status, family or carers' responsibilities, pregnancy, religion, political opinion, national extraction or social origin.
It's a long list.
A long list, but it is central to what Lattouf is arguing. Her claim is that the ABC's management made a decision to fire her after a, quote, coordinated campaign against her by a group of, again, quoting, pro-Israel lobbyists. Those claims have been strongly disputed by the public broadcaster as the case unfolds in court this week.
So the case has come to court. Obviously, now it's been a fairly long time between December 2023 and February 2025. Were there any other steps before we got to court?
Yeah, so the reason that this has been so stretched out over more than a year now is that there have been steps to avoid, I suppose you could argue, from either side getting to this point in the federal court. Lattouf filed a complaint to the Fair Work Commission last year based on those same allegations that I outlined earlier. And during that process, the ABC denied the claims, as it continues to do so, and argued it didn't technically dismiss Lattouf because she was paid through the full 5-day contract. So she didn't complete 5 days of work, but her contract was paid in full.
Yeah.
The ABC also said that it was legally allowed to ask Lattouf to, quote, politely leave after she had breached what they've argued is a breach of the broadcaster's social media policy. And in the end, in June, the Fair Work Commission rejected the ABC's arguments, saying Lattouf was dismissed.
Okay.
But it didn't reach a decision on whether or not that was fair. So the unfair dismissal argument, I suppose, has now continued, and the Fair Work Commission allowed Lattouf to pursue federal court action to answer that question. So that is where we find ourselves now.
I see. When cases are before the federal court, sometimes the judge will make a decision that the proceedings can be live streamed if they're going to be not too sensitive or if they're going to be in something called the public interest, which, given that this involves the public broadcaster, it's easy to understand why that's been the case. So we have been able to watch some of the proceedings on the live stream this week. What have we heard?
Hi, I'm Ola.
And I'm Elliot.
We're the two-person team behind everything video and audio here at the Daily Aus.
If you want to help us grow so we can deliver more of the content that you love, be sure to hit subscribe.
Now let's get back to the video.
So on Monday, we heard the opening statement from Lattouf's legal team. So they've sort of set out the arguments by Antoinette Lattouf, the accusations against the ABC. And what was new in those opening arguments was excerpts from private messages and emails between ABC Managing Director David Anderson, its chair at the time, Ita Buttrose, and Chief Content Officer Chris Oliver Taylor. Now, all three of those senior executives have left or are leaving their positions at the ABC. The court was told that these executives said in messages to each other that Antoinette was an issue, or a, quote, Antoinette issue, and that her socials were, quote, full of anti-Semitic hatred. According to Lattouf's lawyer, the former chair, Ita Buttrose, said, "I have a whole clutch more complaints. Can't she come down with flu or COVID or a stomach upset? We owe her nothing." Now, some of those complaints that text from Buttrose is referring to were also read out by Lattouf's lawyer, but the judge ruled that none of the identities of those complainants could be revealed in court.
So then on Tuesday, there was a focus on Lattouf's mental health and some of the evidence that was presented. What did we hear of that?
Yes, so on day 2 of these hearings, the court heard that Antoinette Lattouf had turned to alcohol, sleeping aids, self-medicating to help with this psychological fallout that she says she's experienced since being dismissed. She also claimed that there have been threats made against her, which New South Wales Police did confirm to the Sydney Morning Herald that they are currently investigating. So that kind of paints this picture from Lattouf's team that she has suffered psychologically as a result of this dismissal. During cross-examination on Tuesday, the ABC's legal team focused on the perceived benefits, to use their words, that Lattouf had accrued since the incident in December 2023. So they pointed to her being awarded prizes, launching a podcast, seeing a sharp increase in her Instagram followers, and launching a conference. Kind of this idea that since the incident, Antoinette Lattouf has actually benefited rather than has suffered in terms of what these arguments are. On this, the ABC's counsel questioned, quote, "Does being the poster girl for justice or humanity or a free and fair press pay very well?"
So then on Wednesday, we heard from the ABC, we heard their opening statement, and we heard from outgoing Managing Director David Anderson. What did we hear specifically, Emma?
Yes, so the latest from the federal court is that yesterday, as you said, Lucy, the ABC's lawyer gave the public broadcaster's opening statement. Ian Neal is the name of the ABC's lawyer, and he argued that the external pressure didn't have any impact on the ABC's decision to dismiss Lattouf from her contract after the first day that she was on air. So she went on air on the Monday, a raft of complaints supposedly came in, they were then assessed, and Antoinette Lattouf went back to work the next day and presented on ABC Radio Sydney according to the ABC's arguments.
So the case is continuing throughout this week. Not sure when we'll have ultimately a judgment in that case, but we will certainly bring you the updates when we have them. Thanks so much for explaining that to me, Emma.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Lucy. And thank you so much for listening to today's episode of The Daily Aus. If you liked it or if you learned something from this episode, please feel free to share it with a friend. Make sure you are following or subscribed wherever you listen or watch The Daily Aus. Have a great day. We'll be back this Arvo with some headlines.